The courtroom doors burst open with a loud bang. Everyone turned to look. The judge stopped talking. The lawyers froze. Even the security guards straightened up like soldiers. Marcus Thompson sat in his expensive suit, smirking at his wife across the courtroom. He had been laughing at her just seconds ago because she came to court without a lawyer. He thought he had already won. But then he saw who walked through those doors. An old man with silver hair stepped inside. He wore a perfectly fitted navy blue suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. His shoes clicked on the marble floor. Click, 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 and the sound echoed through the silent courtroom like a drumbeat. Behind him walked 3 people in matching black suits, carrying briefcases that looked heavy and important. The old man's eyes scanned the room slowly, like a hawk looking for prey. When his gaze landed on Marcus, the smirk disappeared from Marcus's face faster than ice cream melts in the sun. Sarah, Marcus's wife, gasped. Her hands flew to her mouth. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they weren't sad tears. "Dad?" she whispered. The old man smiled at her. A small, gentle smile that made his whole face soften. But when he turned back to look at Marcus, that smile vanished. His expression turned cold and hard, like stone. Marcus felt his stomach drop. His fancy lawyer, Mr. Peterson, who had been so confident just minutes ago, suddenly looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. "Your Honor," the old man said in a voice that commanded respect. "I apologize for the interruption. My name is Judge Robert Harrison, retired, and I'm here to represent my daughter." The entire courtroom gasped. Marcus's face turned white as a ghost. But who was this man? And why did Marcus look like he just saw his worst nightmare walk through the door? Where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. To understand what happened next, we need to go back to where this all started. Sarah Miller was 28 years old and worked at a small bakery downtown. Every morning, she woke up at 4 a.m. to make fresh bread and pastries. Her hands always smelled like flour and cinnamon. She didn't make much money, but she loved her job because she loved making people smile when they tasted her chocolate chip cookies. Sarah had long brown hair that she usually tied in a ponytail, kind brown eyes, and a smile that could light up a whole room. She was the type of person who would give her last dollar to someone who needed it more. One Tuesday morning, a man walked into the bakery wearing a suit that probably cost more than Sarah made in 3 months. He was tall, with slicked back black hair, and he carried himself like he owned the world. "I'll take a coffee," he said, barely looking at Sarah. "Black, and make it quick. I have a meeting." Sarah smiled anyway. "Coming right up. Would you like to try our fresh cinnamon rolls? I just made them this morning." The man looked up from his phone, and their eyes met. He blinked, surprised by her genuine smile. "Sure," he said, his voice softer. "Why not?" His name was Marcus Thompson. He was 32 years old and worked as a sales manager at a big tech company. He made good money, really good money. He drove a BMW, lived in a fancy apartment downtown, and wore watches that cost more than some people's rent. But Marcus was also lonely. He came back to the bakery the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. At first, he came for the coffee. Then he came for the cinnamon rolls. But soon, he realized he was really coming to see Sarah's smile. "You're different from other people I know," Marcus told her one morning. "You're real. You're kind. You don't care about money or status or any of that stuff." Sarah blushed. "Well, those things don't really matter, do they? What matters is being a good person and treating others with kindness." Marcus nodded, but deep down he didn't really believe that. He had spent his whole life chasing money, success, and status. But something about Sarah made him want to be better. 6 months later, Marcus asked Sarah to marry him. It wasn't a fancy proposal with roses and a string quartet. It happened in the bakery after closing time. Sarah had flour on her cheek, and Marcus was helping her clean up. "Marry me," he blurted out suddenly. Sarah laughed. "What? I'm serious. Marry me, Sarah. You make me want to be a better person. You make me happy in a way I've never been happy before." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, happy tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you. They got married 3 months later in a small ceremony. Sarah wore a simple white dress she found on sale. Marcus wore his best suit. They couldn't afford a big wedding, but Sarah didn't care. She had Marcus, and that was all she needed. But Sarah kept a secret from Marcus. She never told him about her family. Whenever Marcus asked about her parents, Sarah would change the subject or give vague answers. My family is complicated, she would say. I don't really talk to them much anymore. Marcus didn't push it. He figured she had her reasons, and he respected that. What Marcus didn't know was that Sarah came from a very powerful family. Her father, Robert Harrison, was a respected judge who had worked in the legal system for over 30 years. He had sent hundreds of criminals to prison. He had fought against corruption. He had a reputation for being fair but tough, the kind of judge that lawyers feared and respected at the same time. Sarah's mother, Elizabeth, came from old money. Her family owned land, businesses, and properties all over the state. Together, Sarah's parents were worth millions of dollars. So why did Sarah work in a bakery? Why did she live in a tiny apartment? Why didn't she tell Marcus about her wealthy family? The answer was simple. Sarah wanted to be loved for who she was, not for her family's money or status. When Sarah was younger, she had dated several men who only wanted her because of her family's wealth. They pretended to love her, but really, they just wanted access to her father's connections and her mother's money. It broke Sarah's heart every time. So when she turned 25, Sarah made a decision. She cut herself off from her family's money. She got her own apartment, found her own job, and lived simply. She wanted to meet someone who would love her, not her bank account. If I ever get married, Sarah told her parents, I want to know it's for real love, not for money. Her parents didn't like it, but they understood. Her father, Judge Harrison, was especially protective of his daughter. If anyone ever hurts you, he told her, you come straight to me. Do you understand? Sarah hugged him. I know, Dad, but I need to do this my way. And that's how Sarah ended up working in a bakery, living in a small apartment, and meeting Marcus, a man who had no idea his wife was the daughter of one of the most powerful judges in the state. For the first year, Sarah and Marcus were happy. They lived in Marcus's apartment, which was nicer than Sarah's old place. Marcus worked long hours, but he always came home with a smile when he saw Sarah. Sarah kept working at the bakery because she loved it, even though Marcus made enough money for both of them. You don't have to work if you don't want to, Marcus told her. I make enough for us. I know, Sarah said, kissing his cheek, but I love baking. It makes me happy. Marcus shrugged. Whatever makes you happy, babe. But slowly, so slowly Sarah almost didn't notice, things started to change. Marcus got a promotion at work. Suddenly, he was making even more money. He started hanging out with his new coworkers, people who drove fancy cars, wore designer clothes, and ate at expensive restaurants. Marcus bought new suits. Then he bought a bigger, fancier car. Then he started talking about moving to a penthouse apartment. Why do we need a penthouse? Sarah asked. This place is fine. Because we can afford it now, Marcus said, like it was obvious. I'm successful, Sarah. I want to live like it. Sarah felt a small knot form in her stomach, but she ignored it. Marcus started making comments about Sarah's job. You still work at that bakery? His new friend, Derek, asked one night when they were all out for dinner. He said bakery, like it was a dirty word. Marcus laughed uncomfortably. Yeah, she likes it. But why? Derek's wife, Vanessa, chimed in. She wore so many diamonds that Sarah thought she might tip over. I mean, Marcus makes good money. You don't need to work. Sarah smiled politely. I work because I enjoy it. I like making people happy with my baking. Vanessa and Derek exchanged looks. The kind of looks that said, how weird. On the drive home, Marcus was quiet. You okay? Sarah asked. Yeah, Marcus said, but he wasn't looking at her. It's just, would you ever consider doing something else? Something more, I don't know, professional? Sarah's heart sank. You're embarrassed by my job. No, that's not. Marcus sighed. Look, I just think, I'm at a different level now in my career, and it would be nice if you did something that matched that level. You know?" Sarah didn't say anything for the rest of the drive. Things got worse. Marcus started working even longer hours. He went to fancy parties and business dinners without Sarah because, as he put it, "It's all work stuff. You'd be bored." But Sarah knew the real reason. He was embarrassed to introduce his wife, the bakery worker, to his successful friends. Sarah tried to ignore it. She tried to remember the Marcus who had fallen in love with her in the bakery. The Marcus who said she made him want to be better. But that Marcus seemed to have disappeared. 2 years into their marriage, Marcus came home late one Friday night. He smelled like expensive perfume that wasn't Sarah's. "Where were you?" Sarah asked quietly. "Work event," Marcus said, loosening his tie. He didn't look at her. "You smell like perfume." It was a crowded party. People were everywhere, still not looking at her. Sarah's hands trembled. "Marcus, are you seeing someone else?" Finally, Marcus looked at her, and the coldness in his eyes made Sarah feel like she'd been punched in the stomach. "What if I am?" he said. Sarah couldn't breathe. "What?" Marcus threw his tie on the couch. "You want the truth, Sarah?" "Fine. Yes. I've been seeing someone from work. Her name is Ashley. She's smart, successful, sophisticated. She fits into my world." Tears streamed down Sarah's face. "How could you? How could I?" Marcus's voice got louder. "How could you? You had the chance to be someone important, Sarah. But you chose to stay working at some nobody bakery, making minimum wage, embarrassing me in front of my colleagues." "I thought you loved me," Sarah whispered. "I loved who I thought you were," Marcus shot back. "I thought you were this humble, down-to-earth girl who would grow with me. But you stayed exactly the same. You never wanted more. You never wanted better." "Better than what? Better than being kind? Better than being genuine?" Marcus laughed. A mean, ugly laugh. "You're so naive, Sarah. That stuff doesn't matter in the real world. Money matters. Status matters. Success matters. Then why did you marry me?" Marcus looked away. "I don't know. Temporary insanity, I guess." Those words cut Sarah deeper than any knife could. "I want a divorce," Sarah said quietly. "Fine," Marcus said immediately. "I want one too." The next morning, Sarah moved out. She went back to her tiny old apartment that she had kept just in case. She cried for 3 days straight. But then she dried her tears and made a decision. She would handle this with dignity. Sarah called a divorce lawyer, but the lawyer wanted a $5,000 retainer fee just to start the case. Sarah didn't have that kind of money saved up. She called 3 more lawyers. Same story. Divorce lawyers were expensive. Really expensive. Sarah thought about calling her father. Judge Harrison could help her. He could get her the best lawyers. He could make sure Marcus didn't take advantage of her. But Sarah's pride stopped her. She had left her family's wealth behind to live on her own. She had wanted to prove she could make it independently. Calling her father now felt like admitting defeat. "I'll represent myself," Sarah decided. How hard can it be? Meanwhile, Marcus hired the best divorce lawyer money could buy, Mr. Richard Peterson. Mr. Peterson wore suits that cost $3,000. His office was on the top floor of the fanciest building downtown. He had won 95% of his cases, and he was known for being ruthless in court. "I want to make sure she gets nothing," Marcus told Mr. Peterson. "I want her to regret ever wasting my time." Mr. Peterson smiled, a shark's smile. "Leave it to me." Marcus didn't just want a divorce. He wanted revenge. He was angry at Sarah for holding him back. He blamed her for every moment he felt embarrassed in front of his wealthy friends. So Marcus and Mr. Peterson created a plan. They would claim that Sarah had been unfaithful during the marriage, even though it was Marcus who had cheated. They would say that Sarah had been using Marcus for his money, even though Sarah had her own job and never asked Marcus for anything. They would paint Sarah as a gold digger who didn't deserve a single penny. And because Sarah didn't have a lawyer, Marcus thought this would be easy. The court date arrived. Sarah woke up that morning with butterflies in her stomach. She put on her best dress. A simple blue one she had bought on sale 3 years ago. She brushed her hair and tried to look confident, even though she was terrified inside. She had spent the last 2 weeks reading about divorce law, taking notes and preparing her case. But she knew she was no match for a professional lawyer like Mr. Peterson. Sarah walked into the courthouse at 9 a.m. The building was huge, with tall marble columns and echoing hallways. Everything felt cold and intimidating. She found the courtroom and took a seat on the wooden bench. Her heart pounded in her chest. Marcus arrived 15 minutes later with Mr. Peterson. They both wore expensive suits and carried fancy briefcases. They looked like they owned the place. Marcus glanced at Sarah and smirked. "No lawyer?" he said loud enough for people nearby to hear. "What a surprise." Mr. Peterson chuckled. "This is going to be even easier than I thought." Sarah kept her head high even though she wanted to cry. The bailiff called everyone to stand. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Mendoza." Judge Mendoza was a stern-looking woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She sat down and gestured for everyone else to sit. "We're here today for the divorce proceedings of Thompson versus Thompson," Judge Mendoza said. "Mr. Thompson is represented by Mr. Richard Peterson. Mrs. Thompson is representing herself." "Yes, Your Honor," Sarah said quietly, standing up. Marcus snorted. Mr. Peterson had to hide his smile behind his hand. Judge Mendoza raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Thompson, I strongly recommend you seek legal counsel. Divorce proceedings can be complicated, and—" "I understand, Your Honor," Sarah interrupted politely, "but I'm prepared to represent myself." "Very well," Judge Mendoza said, though she looked concerned. "Let's begin. Mr. Peterson, you may present your opening statement." Mr. Peterson stood up and buttoned his suit jacket. He walked toward the front of the courtroom like he was walking onto a stage. "Your Honor," Mr. Peterson began in a smooth, confident voice, "this is a simple case. My client, Mr. Marcus Thompson, entered into marriage with Mrs. Sarah Thompson under false pretenses. He believed he was marrying a genuine, humble woman who loved him for who he was. Instead, he discovered he had married a manipulative gold digger who—" "Objection!" Sarah stood up, her voice shaking. "That's not true." Judge Mendoza looked at Sarah kindly. "Mrs. Thompson, in a courtroom, you need to state the grounds for your objection. Just saying that's not true isn't enough." Sarah's face turned red. She sat down, embarrassed. Mr. Peterson continued, his smirk growing wider. "As I was saying, Mrs. Thompson clearly married my client for financial gain. Throughout their marriage, she contributed nothing financially to the household. She worked at a minimum wage job at a bakery," he said, "bakery," like it was something disgusting, "while my client worked hard to build a successful career. Furthermore," Mr. Peterson continued, "we have evidence that Mrs. Thompson was unfaithful during the marriage." Sarah shot to her feet. "What? That's a lie." "Mrs. Thompson," Judge Mendoza said firmly, "please sit down. You'll have your chance to speak." Sarah sat, her hands shaking with anger. Mr. Peterson pulled out a folder. "We have testimony from several witnesses who saw Mrs. Thompson having lunch with an unknown man on multiple occasions. Intimate lunches where they were laughing, holding hands. That was my friend from high school," Sarah burst out. "He was going through a divorce and needed someone to talk to." Marcus leaned back in his chair, enjoying the show. Mr. Peterson ignored Sarah and kept talking. "Given these facts, Your Honor, my client is asking that Mrs. Thompson receive no alimony, no division of assets, and that she be required to pay for all court costs." He sat down, looking very pleased with himself. Judge Mendoza turned to Sarah. "Mrs. Thompson, your response?" Sarah stood on shaky legs. She had practiced her speech 100 times at home, but now her mind went blank. The courtroom felt too big, too cold, too scary. I didn't marry Marcus for money," Sarah began. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I married him because I loved him. I thought he loved me too. I worked at the bakery because I loved baking, not because I wasn't capable of anything else. And I never cheated on him." Her voice got stronger as she spoke. Marcus is the one who cheated. He's the one who started treating me like I was embarrassing to him. He's the one who changed, not me. Mr. Peterson stood up. Your Honor, Mrs. Thompson has provided no evidence for these wild accusations. Meanwhile, we have documented proof of, that's when it happened. Marcus leaned toward Mr. Peterson and whispered something. Then he turned to Sarah with the cruelest smile she'd ever seen. Face it, Sarah, Marcus said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. You came here with no lawyer because you couldn't even afford one. You're nobody. You have nothing. And when this is over, you'll leave with nothing. The people in the courtroom gasped. Even Judge Mendoza looked shocked at Marcus's cruelty. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes, but she refused to cry. Not here. Not in front of him. Marcus laughed. What are you going to do, Sarah? Call your imaginary lawyer friends? Face it, you're alone. You've always been alone. That's why you were working in a bakery. Because you're a nobody who... Bang! The courtroom doors exploded open. The courtroom doors didn't just open. They slammed against the walls with such force that the sound echoed like thunder through the huge room. Every single person turned to look. The security guard at the back jumped so hard he almost dropped his walkie-talkie. The court reporter's fingers froze over her keyboard. Even Judge Mendoza's stern expression cracked for just a moment, showing surprise. But nobody was more shocked than Marcus Thompson. His cruel laugh died in his throat. The smirk melted off his face like ice cream in the hot sun. His skin turned pale, not just pale but white like paper. His mouth dropped open, and he looked like a fish gasping for air. Mr. Peterson, the fancy lawyer who had been so confident just seconds ago, suddenly looked like he wanted to crawl under the table and disappear. Through those open doors walked a man who commanded respect without saying a single word. Judge Robert Harrison was 72 years old, but he stood tall and straight like a soldier. His silver hair was perfectly combed. His navy blue suit was tailored so well it looked like it was made just for his body, which it was because it cost $8,000. His black leather shoes shined so much you could see your reflection in them. But it wasn't his clothes that made everyone stare. It was his presence. Judge Harrison walked into that courtroom like he owned it. His footsteps, click, 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 echoed in the dead silence. His blue eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the room slowly. When those eyes landed on Marcus, it felt like the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Behind Judge Harrison walked three people dressed in matching black suits. They moved together like a well-trained army unit. The first was a woman in her 40s with red hair pulled back in a tight bun. She carried a briefcase in one hand and a tablet in the other. Her name was Margaret Chen, and she was one of the top family law attorneys in the entire state. The second was a young man, probably in his 30s, with glasses and perfectly styled blonde hair. His briefcase looked so stuffed with papers it might explode. His name was David Rodriguez, and he specialized in finding evidence that other lawyers missed. The third was an older gentleman with gray hair and a kind face that didn't match the intensity in his eyes. His name was Henry Blackwood, and he was a private investigator who had worked with Judge Harrison for over 20 years. Together, this team had won cases that other lawyers said were impossible to win. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth. "Dad?" she whispered, her voice so quiet that only the people closest to her could hear. Tears immediately filled her eyes. But this time, they weren't tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of relief, of hope, of knowing that she wasn't alone anymore. Judge Harrison's stern expression softened the moment he looked at his daughter. His whole face changed. The hard, scary judge disappeared for just a second, and all that was left was a father who loved his daughter more than anything in the world. He gave Sarah a small smile, the kind of smile that said, "Everything is going to be okay now. I'm here." But when Judge Harrison turned back to look at the front of the courtroom, that gentle father disappeared. The legendary judge was back, and he looked angry. Not the kind of angry where someone yells and screams. No, this was the quiet, dangerous kind of angry, the kind that makes you wish they would yell because at least then you'd know what was coming. "Your Honor," Judge Harrison said, his voice deep and powerful, filling every corner of the courtroom. I apologize for my late arrival. Traffic was quite heavy this morning. His tone was polite and respectful, but there was steel underneath those words. Judge Mendoza blinked several times, like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Judge Harrison? The Judge Robert Harrison. Retired, yes. Judge Harrison confirmed with a slight nod. Though I maintain my license to practice law. I'm here today to represent my daughter, Mrs. Sarah Thompson. The courtroom exploded with whispers. People in the gallery, the seats where regular citizens sit to watch court cases, started talking to each other in excited, hushed voices. Did he say Judge Harrison? The Judge Harrison? The one who sent all those corrupt politicians to prison. Oh my God! That's really him. I saw him on the news. He's a legend. Mr. Peterson's face had gone from confident to worried to absolutely terrified in the span of about 10 seconds. His hand, which had been holding a pen so casually, now trembled slightly. He tried to hide it by putting the pen down, but everyone noticed. Marcus looked like he might throw up. All the color had drained from his face. His fancy suit suddenly didn't make him look powerful anymore. It made him look like a little boy playing dress-up in his father's clothes. Judge Mendoza cleared her throat. I see. Well, this is certainly unexpected. Mr. Peterson, did you know that Mrs. Thompson was Judge Harrison's daughter? Mr. Peterson opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He tried again. No, Your Honor. We had no idea. Of course you didn't, Judge Harrison said, his voice carrying just a hint of coldness. My daughter chose to live independently, without using her family's name or resources. She wanted to make her own way in the world. She wanted to be loved for who she is, not for who her family is. He paused, and his eyes locked onto Marcus like a laser beam. Unfortunately, Judge Harrison continued, she married a man who didn't appreciate that. A man who took her kindness for weakness. A man who mocked her in this very courtroom just moments ago. Marcus sank lower in his chair. If he could have melted into the floor, he would have. Now, Judge Harrison said, walking forward with his legal team following behind him. Shall we begin this case properly? Because I have quite a lot to say about the testimony we've heard so far. Judge Mendoza banged her gavel. Bang. Order. Everyone quiet down. The whispers stopped immediately. Judge Harrison, Judge Mendoza said, and there was respect in her voice that hadn't been there before. You're certainly welcome to represent your daughter. However, given your reputation and experience, I want to make sure we follow proper procedure. Do you have all the necessary documentation? Margaret Chun, the red-haired lawyer, stepped forward. Your Honor, we filed the notice of appearance electronically 15 minutes ago. You should have it in your system. The court clerk quickly typed on her computer, then nodded to Judge Mendoza. Confirmed, Your Honor. Everything is in order. Very well, Judge Mendoza said. She looked at Mr. Peterson. Mr. Peterson, do you need a moment to consult with your client? Mr. Peterson looked at Marcus. Marcus looked back at him with desperate eyes that screamed, do something! But what could Mr. Peterson do? He was good at his job, sure. He had won a lot of cases. But Judge Robert Harrison wasn't just another lawyer. He was a legend. During his 30 years as a judge, Harrison had presided over some of the biggest cases in the state. He had sent corrupt politicians to prison. He had ruled against powerful corporations that were breaking the law. He had stood up to threats, bribes, and intimidation without ever backing down. Lawyers who faced Judge Harrison in his courtroom used to spend weeks preparing, knowing that he would spot any tiny mistake or lie. He had a reputation for being fair but absolutely ruthless when he caught someone trying to deceive the court. And now, that same man was sitting across from Marcus and Mr. Peterson, ready to defend his daughter. No, Your Honor, Mr. Peterson said weakly. We're ready to proceed. But he wasn't ready. Not even close. Judge Harrison sat down at the defendant's table next to Sarah. He gently took her hand and squeezed it. I'm here now, sweetheart, he whispered to her. You don't have to face this alone anymore. Sarah squeezed back, tears streaming down her face. Dad, I'm so sorry. I should have called you sooner. I just wanted to handle it myself. I wanted to prove that I could." "Shoo," Judge Harrison said softly. "You have nothing to apologize for. You were trying to be independent and strong. I'm proud of you for that. But you never have to face bullies alone, especially not when they're trying to destroy you in a court of law." He pulled out a handkerchief from his pocket and gently wiped away her tears. "Now let me handle this. Just sit back and watch." David Rodriguez, the young lawyer with glasses, opened his overstuffed briefcase and started pulling out folder after folder. He arranged them on the table in neat stacks. Henry Blackwood, the private investigator, pulled out a tablet and started swiping through pages and pages of information. Margaret Chun stood next to Judge Harrison, ready to assist with anything he needed. They looked like a well-oiled machine working together perfectly. Marcus watched all of this with growing horror. Just 15 minutes ago, he had been laughing at Sarah for not having a lawyer. He had felt so powerful, so in control. Now he felt like a mouse trapped in a corner with a very angry cat staring down at him. Judge Mendoza looked at Judge Harrison. "Judge Harrison, would you like to make an opening statement?" "Actually, Your Honor," Judge Harrison said, standing up slowly, "I'd prefer to address the statements that Mr. Peterson has already made. I believe it will be more efficient that way." "Proceed," Judge Mendoza said. Judge Harrison walked to the center of the courtroom. He didn't rush. He didn't hurry. He moved with the calm confidence of a man who had done this 1,000 times before. "Your Honor," Judge Harrison began, "I've been practicing law for over 40 years. In that time, I've seen many things. I've seen guilty people try to look innocent. I've seen innocent people struggle to prove the truth. But rarely, have I seen such a blatant display of lies, manipulation, and cruelty as what I've witnessed in this courtroom today." Mr. Peterson started to stand up. "Your Honor, I object to." "On what grounds?" Judge Mendoza asked sharply. Mr. Peterson opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no grounds. He just didn't want Judge Harrison to keep talking. "Sit down, Mr. Peterson," Judge Mendoza said. Mr. Peterson sat. Judge Harrison continued. "Mr. Peterson stated that my daughter married Mr. Thompson under false pretenses, that she was a gold digger who wanted access to his money." He paused and looked directly at Marcus. "Let's examine that claim, shall we? Mr. Rodriguez, would you please display Exhibit A?" David Rodriguez tapped on his tablet, and suddenly an image appeared on the large screen at the front of the courtroom. It was a financial document. "This," Judge Harrison explained, "is my daughter's bank statement from the month before she married Mr. Thompson. As you can see, she had $12,847 in her savings account. Not a fortune, certainly, but a respectable amount for a young woman living on a baker's salary." He gestured to the screen again, and another document appeared. "This is Mr. Thompson's bank statement from the same time period. He had $8,293 in his account. My daughter actually had more money saved than he did when they got married." Gasps filled the courtroom. Marcus's face turned bright red. That's private information. How did you get that?" "Discovery, Mr. Thompson," Judge Harrison said coolly. "In divorce proceedings, financial records are fair game. You should know this. After all, your lawyer requested my daughter's financial information first." Margaret Chin smiled slightly. They had turned Mr. Peterson's own strategy against him. Judge Harrison wasn't done. "Now, Mr. Peterson also claimed that my daughter contributed nothing financially to the marriage. Let's address that lie next." Another image appeared on the screen. This one was a spreadsheet. "This is a breakdown of household expenses during the Thompson marriage," Judge Harrison explained. "My daughter paid for groceries every week. She paid for utilities. She paid for household supplies. In fact, over the course of their 2-year marriage, my daughter contributed approximately $18,000 to household expenses." He looked at Marcus. "How much did you contribute to household expenses, Mr. Thompson?" "According to these records, you paid for rent and your car payment. That's it. Everything else came from my daughter's paycheck." Marcus looked like he wanted to sink through the floor and disappear. But perhaps the most disgusting lie, Judge Harrison said, and his voice got harder, colder, was the accusation that my daughter was unfaithful during the marriage. Mr. Peterson jumped up. Your Honor, we have witnesses who saw my daughter having lunch with a childhood friend. Judge Harrison interrupted. Mr. Blackwood, if you please. Henry Blackwood stood up. Your Honor, I'm a licensed private investigator. I've worked in this field for 25 years. After hearing about these accusations, I spent the last week investigating them. He pulled out a folder. The unknown man that Mr. Peterson's witnesses saw having lunch with Mrs. Thompson was actually Jonathan Miller. Mr. Miller has known Mrs. Thompson since they were children. Their families attended the same church. Mr. Miller was going through a difficult divorce at the time, and Mrs. Thompson was providing emotional support as a friend. Blackwood pulled out more papers. I have testimony from Mr. Miller confirming this. I have testimony from the restaurant staff who saw them together and said their interactions were clearly platonic. They sat across from each other, not next to each other. They didn't hold hands. They didn't kiss. They were simply two old friends talking. He looked directly at Mr. Peterson. Your witnesses either made assumptions based on innocent interactions, or they were paid to lie. Either way, their testimony is worthless. The courtroom buzzed with excited whispers again. Judge Mendoza banged her gavel. Order! Judge Harrison walked closer to where Marcus and Mr. Peterson sat. He didn't yell. He didn't raise his voice. But somehow that made him even more intimidating. Now let's talk about who actually committed adultery in this marriage, Judge Harrison said quietly. Marcus's eyes went wide. Wait! Mr. Blackwood, Judge Harrison continued. What did your investigation reveal about Mr. Thompson's activities over the last 6 months? Henry Blackwood opened another folder. Mr. Thompson has been having an affair with a coworker named Ashley Winters for approximately 7 months. I have photographs of them entering hotels together. I have credit card receipts showing that Mr. Thompson paid for romantic dinners, gifts, and even a weekend trip to wine country, all while still married to Mrs. Thompson. Boom! The courtroom exploded with noise. People were gasping, talking, and pointing at Marcus. Marcus looked absolutely horrified. How did you? Where did you? I'm very good at my job, Mr. Thompson, Blackwood said simply. Margaret Chin stood up. Your Honor, we'd like to submit all of this evidence for the record. We have photographs, credit card statements, hotel receipts, and testimony from multiple witnesses who saw Mr. Thompson with Ms. Winters on numerous occasions. Judge Mendoza nodded. Accepted. Mr. Peterson, do you have any response to this evidence? Mr. Peterson looked at Marcus with an expression that clearly said, Why didn't you tell me about this? Marcus just stared at the table, saying nothing. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat. Your Honor, we need to review this evidence more carefully before we can respond. I'm sure you do, Judge Harrison said dryly. Judge Harrison turned to Sarah. Sweetheart, I know this is difficult, but I need you to tell the court, in your own words, what happened in this marriage. Can you do that? Sarah nodded. She stood up, wiping her eyes, and took a deep breath. Your Honor, Sarah began, her voice shaky at first but getting stronger. When I met Marcus, I thought I had found someone who loved me for me. Not for my family's money. Not for connections. Just me. She looked at Marcus, and there was such sadness in her eyes. I never told Marcus about my family because I wanted to be sure he loved me. I'd been hurt before by men who only wanted my family's wealth. So I cut myself off from that money. I got my own apartment, my own job, my own life. I wanted to know that whoever I married would love me even if I had nothing. Sarah's voice cracked a little. And at first, Marcus did love me. At least I thought he did. He came to the bakery every day. He said he loved how kind I was. He said I made him want to be a better person. She wiped away a tear. But after we got married, things changed. Marcus got promoted and started making more money. And suddenly, I wasn't good enough anymore. My job wasn't fancy enough. I didn't wear the right clothes. I didn't fit in with his new rich friends. Did Mr. Thompson ever tell you this directly? Judge Harrison asked gently. Yes, Sarah said. He told me I was embarrassing him. He told me I should quit my job and do something more professional. But I loved my job. I loved making people happy with my baking. Why should I have to give that up? She looked directly at Marcus now, and her voice got stronger. Then I found out he was cheating on me. When I confronted him, he didn't even deny it. He said the woman he was seeing was sophisticated and successful. Like those things are more important than being a good person. Like those things are more important than our wedding vows. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. I asked him for a divorce because I couldn't stay with someone who treated me like that. And you know what he did? He hired an expensive lawyer and made up lies about me. He said I was a gold digger. He said I cheated on him. He tried to make it so I would get nothing from our marriage. A marriage where I contributed just as much as he did. Her voice rose with emotion. And then today, in this courtroom, he laughed at me. He mocked me for not having a lawyer. He called me a nobody. He tried to humiliate me in front of all these people. Sarah looked at Judge Mendoza. Your Honor, I don't want Marcus's money. I never did. I just want justice. I want people to know the truth about what kind of man he really is. The courtroom was completely silent. Several people in the gallery were wiping away tears. Even Judge Mendoza looked moved. Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. You may sit down. Sarah sat, and her father squeezed her hand supportively. Judge Harrison stood up again. Your Honor, my daughter has been through enough. She's been lied about, cheated on, and publicly humiliated. And for what? Because she committed the terrible crime of working in a bakery? Because she valued kindness over money? He turned to look at Marcus, and the disgust on his face was clear. Mr. Thompson came into this courtroom thinking he had already won. He thought that because my daughter didn't have a lawyer, she would be easy to crush. He thought he could lie and manipulate and get away with it. Judge Harrison's voice got harder. He was wrong. Mr. Peterson finally found his voice. Your Honor, this is all very dramatic, but at the end of the day, this is a simple divorce case. The marriage is over. Both parties want out. Can't we just divide the assets fairly and move on? Oh, we'll divide the assets fairly, Judge Harrison said. But there's something else we need to discuss first. He nodded to David Rodriguez, who pulled out yet another folder. Mr. Thompson, Judge Harrison said, did you sign a prenuptial agreement before marrying my daughter? Marcus blinked. What? No. Sarah didn't have any money, so there was no point in. Actually, Judge Harrison interrupted. My daughter has quite a bit of money. Everyone stared. Sarah looked confused. Dad, what are you talking about? Judge Harrison smiled at his daughter. Sweetheart, do you remember your grandmother? My mother? Who passed away when you were 23? Of course, Sarah said. I loved Grandma. Well, your grandmother loved you too. Very much. In fact, she left you a substantial inheritance in her will. Sarah's eyes went wide. What? The inheritance was placed in a trust fund that you couldn't access until you were 30 years old, Judge Harrison explained. Your grandmother wanted to make sure you were mature enough to handle that kind of money responsibly. You turned 30 last month. He pulled out a document and showed it to Judge Mendoza. This is the trust fund documentation. The current value of Mrs. Thompson's inheritance is $2.3 million. The courtroom erupted. People were shouting, gasping, standing up to get a better look at the document. Marcus looked like he'd been hit in the face with a brick. His mouth hung open. His eyes were huge. $2 million? He stammered. $2.3 million, Judge Harrison corrected. And since this inheritance was placed in a trust before your marriage, it's not considered marital property. It belongs entirely to my daughter. Mr. Peterson was frantically flipping through papers, trying to figure out how he'd missed this crucial piece of information. Judge Harrison continued, clearly enjoying this moment. So let's recap, shall we? Mr. Thompson claimed my daughter was a gold digger who married him for money. But it turns out my daughter is actually worth far more than Mr. Thompson ever will be. He looked at Marcus with cold satisfaction. Who's the gold digger now, Mr. Thompson? Marcus couldn't speak. He just sat there, frozen, as the reality of the situation crashed down on him. He had thrown away a marriage to a woman who was not only kind and genuine but also secretly a millionaire. He had cheated on her, mocked her, and dragged her through court, all while thinking she was poor and powerless. And now everyone in this courtroom knew what a fool he was. Judge Harrison wasn't finished. Your Honor, given the evidence we've presented, proof of Mr. Thompson's adultery, proof of his lies to this court, and proof of his cruel treatment of my daughter, we have a few requests. Go ahead, Judge Mendoza said. First, we request that my daughter receive 50% of all marital assets acquired during the marriage. This includes Mr. Thompson's car, his retirement account contributions made during the marriage, and any other property purchased with marital funds. Mr. Peterson stood up weakly. Your Honor, that's fair, Judge Mendoza interrupted. In this state, marital assets are typically divided 50-50 unless there are extenuating circumstances. Continue, Judge Harrison. Second, Judge Harrison said, we request that Mr. Thompson pay all court costs and legal fees associated with this divorce, including the fees for my legal team. Marcus made a choking sound. Judge Harrison's legal team probably cost thousands of dollars an hour. Third, Judge Harrison continued, we request a formal finding from this court that Mr. Thompson committed adultery during the marriage. This finding should be included in the final divorce decree. Why does that matter? Marcus blurted out. Judge Harrison smiled coldly. Because, Mr. Thompson, when future romantic partners search your name and find your divorce records, they'll see exactly what kind of husband you were. They'll know you're a cheater and a liar. Marcus's face went pale again. And finally, Judge Harrison said, we request a restraining order preventing Mr. Thompson from contacting, harassing, or coming within 500 feet of my daughter after this divorce is finalized. On what grounds? Mr. Peterson asked. Henry Blackwood stood up. During my investigation, I discovered that Mr. Thompson sent numerous threatening text messages to Mrs. Thompson over the past 2 weeks. Messages saying things like, I'll make sure you regret this and you're going to wish you never met me. He handed copies of the text messages to Judge Mendoza. Judge Mendoza read them, and her expression darkened. Mr. Thompson, did you send these messages? Marcus looked at his lawyer desperately. Mr. Peterson could only shrug helplessly. I was angry, Marcus finally admitted. I didn't mean. Whether you meant them or not, Judge Mendoza said sharply, these messages constitute harassment. I'm granting the restraining order. Bang! She hit her gavel. Marcus slumped in his chair, defeated. But Judge Harrison still wasn't done. Your Honor, there's one more thing, he said. Mr. Rodriguez, would you please explain what else we discovered during our investigation? David Rodriguez stood up, adjusting his glasses. During our research into Mr. Thompson's finances, we discovered some irregularities. What kind of irregularities? Judge Mendoza asked. Mr. Thompson has been claiming certain tax deductions that he may not be entitled to. We've compiled a report of these questionable deductions, and we plan to forward our findings to the IRS for review. Marcus shot to his feet. You can't do that. Actually, we can, Judge Harrison said calmly. And we will. If you've been cheating on your taxes, Mr. Thompson, that's a federal crime. The IRS takes that very seriously. Mr. Peterson grabbed Marcus's arm and pulled him back down into his seat. Don't say anything else, he hissed. Margaret added, we also discovered that Mr. Thompson has been using company resources for personal purposes, including using his company credit card to pay for his affair with Ms. Winters. We've sent a detailed report to his employer's Human Resources Department. Marcus looked like he might faint. You're trying to ruin my life. No, Mr. Thompson, Judge Harrison said coldly. You ruined your own life when you decided to treat my daughter like garbage. We're just making sure there are consequences for your actions. Sarah spoke up quietly. Dad, isn't this going too far? Judge Harrison turned to his daughter, and his expression softened. Sweetheart, this man lied about you. He tried to destroy your reputation. He tried to take everything from you. He doesn't deserve mercy." "I know," Sarah said, "but I don't want to become like him. I don't want revenge to make me cruel." Judge Harrison studied his daughter for a long moment. Then he smiled, a real, genuine smile full of pride. "You're a better person than I am," he said softly. "You always have been." He turned back to Judge Mendoza. "Your Honor, my daughter is right. We'll withdraw our request to report Mr. Thompson to the IRS and his employer, on one condition." "What condition?" Judge Mendoza asked. "That Mr. Thompson stands up right now, in this courtroom, and apologizes to my daughter. A real, genuine apology. Not some fake legal statement, but actual words from his heart, if he has one." Everyone looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at Mr. Peterson. Mr. Peterson nodded slightly as if to say, "Just do it. This is the best deal you're going to get." Slowly, Marcus stood up. He looked at Sarah. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Marcus opened his mouth. Marcus Thompson stood in the middle of the courtroom, and for the first time since this whole ordeal began, he looked small. His expensive suit didn't make him look powerful anymore. His slicked-back hair that he'd spent 20 minutes perfecting that morning now looked messy because he'd been running his hands through it nervously. His face was pale, and there were beads of sweat on his forehead. Every eye in the courtroom was on him. The gallery was packed with people who had been watching this drama unfold like it was a movie. Court reporters had their fingers hovering over their keyboards, ready to record whatever Marcus said next. The security guards stood a little straighter, watching carefully in case things got heated. Judge Mendoza leaned forward in her chair, waiting. Mr. Peterson sat frozen at his table, probably praying that his client wouldn't say something stupid and make everything worse. Judge Harrison stood tall with his arms crossed, his sharp blue eyes fixed on Marcus like a hawk watching a mouse. And Sarah just sat there quietly, her hands folded in her lap, waiting to hear what the man she used to love would say. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He started, then stopped. The silence stretched out like a rubber band being pulled tighter and tighter, about to snap. "Take your time, Mr. Thompson," Judge Mendoza said. Though her tone suggested she wasn't feeling very patient, Marcus swallowed hard. He looked at Sarah, and for just a second, just one tiny second, something flickered in his eyes. Was it regret? Shame? Guilt? "Sarah," Marcus began, his voice barely above a whisper. "Speak up, Mr. Thompson," Judge Harrison said firmly. "Everyone in this courtroom needs to hear what you have to say." Marcus cleared his throat and spoke louder. "Sarah, I'm sorry." He paused like he thought those 3 words would be enough. They weren't. "Go on," Judge Harrison prompted, his voice like steel. Marcus took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry for everything. For cheating on you. For lying about you in court. For mocking you today. His voice cracked. "For treating you like you weren't important when you were the best thing that ever happened to me." Sarah's eyes widened slightly. She hadn't expected that. Marcus continued, and now the words started pouring out faster, like a dam had broken. "When we first met, you made me feel like I could be a better person. You didn't care about my job or my car or any of that stuff. You just cared about me, and that scared me." He laughed bitterly. "Isn't that stupid? I was scared because someone actually loved me for who I really was. So when I started making more money and hanging out with those rich people, I let them get in my head. They made fun of you working at a bakery. They made jokes about you behind your back. And instead of defending you, instead of being proud of my wife who was kind and real, I was embarrassed." Tears started forming in Marcus's eyes. Real tears. "I threw away our marriage because I was too weak to stand up for what actually mattered. I chose money and status over love. I chose being successful over being happy. And now," he gestured helplessly around the courtroom, "now everyone knows what a fool I am. Everyone knows I cheated on my wife. Everyone knows I'm a liar. And worst of all, I know that I destroyed the one good thing I had in my life." Marcus looked directly at Sarah now, and the tears were streaming down his face. You deserved so much better than me, Sarah. You deserved someone who would love you the way you loved me, completely and without conditions. Someone who would be proud to tell the world about his wife who gets up at 4 a.m. to bake bread and makes people smile with her chocolate chip cookies. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. I'm sorry I wasn't that person. I'm sorry I hurt you. And I'm sorry I was too stupid to realize what I had until it was gone. The courtroom was dead silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody even seemed to breathe. Sarah sat very still, tears running down her cheeks. But she wasn't sobbing or making any sound. She just let the tears fall while she stared at the man who used to be her husband. Finally, she spoke. Do you mean that, Marcus? Or are you just saying it because my father and his lawyers backed you into a corner? Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I don't know. Maybe it's both. Maybe I wouldn't have realized any of this if I hadn't been forced to face it. But that doesn't make it less true. I was a fool. I did throw away something precious. And I am sorry. He looked down at his expensive shoes. For what it's worth, I know it's too late. I know you'll never forgive me. And I don't blame you. I needed you to know that you were right about everything. About what really matters in life. And I was wrong. Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep, shaky breath. Then she opened them and looked at her father. Dad, can I speak? Of course, sweetheart, Judge Harrison said gently. You can say anything you want. Sarah stood up slowly. She walked toward Marcus until she was standing just a few feet away from him. Marcus looked at her with red, puffy eyes, probably expecting her to yell at him or tell him what a terrible person he was. But Sarah didn't do that. Marcus, she said quietly, when we got married, I promised to love you for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and health. I meant those words. I really meant them. She paused, gathering her thoughts. When you started changing, when you started caring more about money and status, it broke my heart. Not because I judged you for wanting success, but because you stopped being the man I fell in love with. You stopped being kind. You stopped being real. You became someone I didn't recognize. Marcus nodded, not trusting himself to speak. And when I found out you were cheating, Sarah continued, her voice stronger now, it felt like someone had ripped my heart out of my chest. I kept asking myself, what did I do wrong? Why wasn't I enough? I blamed myself for months. It wasn't your fault, Marcus said hoarsely. None of it was your fault. It was all me. I know that now, Sarah said, but I didn't know it then. And that's why I'm standing here today, to make sure the world knows the truth. Not because I want revenge, but because I want justice. I want people to know that I wasn't a gold digger or a cheater or any of the horrible things your lawyer said about me. She glanced at Mr. Peterson, who had the decency to look ashamed. But here's the thing, Marcus, Sarah said, turning back to him. Even after everything you did to me, the cheating, the lies, the mockery, I don't hate you. Marcus looked up, surprised. You don't. No, Sarah said simply. I'm angry at you. I'm hurt by what you did. But I don't hate you. Because hate is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It would only hurt me, not you. She took another deep breath. Your apology, I believe you mean it. At least I believe you mean it right now in this moment. Whether you'll still mean it tomorrow or next week or next year, I don't know. But I choose to believe that somewhere inside you, there's still a piece of the man I fell in love with. The man who came to my bakery every morning and said I made him want to be better. Marcus's face crumpled, and he started crying harder. Sarah held up her hand, stopping him. I'm not done. I need to say this. Marcus nodded and wiped his eyes, waiting. I forgive you, Marcus, Sarah said, and the words seemed to echo through the entire courtroom. Not because you deserve it, not because what you did was okay, but because I deserve peace. I deserve to move on with my life without carrying around the weight of anger and bitterness. She smiled sadly. Forgiveness doesn't mean I'm taking you back. It doesn't mean we're going to be friends. It doesn't mean I'm forgetting what happened. It just means I'm choosing to let go of the anger so I can heal and move forward. Sarah turned to Judge Mendoza. Your Honor, I accept the court's division of assets and the restraining order, but I don't want my father to report Marcus to the IRS or his company. He made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I don't want to ruin his entire life. He'll have to live with the consequences of his actions, but I don't need to be the one who destroys him. Judge Harrison stepped forward. Sweetheart, are you sure? This man tried to. I'm sure, Dad, Sarah said firmly. This is my choice, and I choose mercy. Judge Harrison looked at his daughter with such pride in his eyes that it was almost blinding. You're a remarkable woman, Sarah Harrison Thompson. Your mother and I raised you right. He turned to Marcus. You heard my daughter, Mr. Thompson. She's giving you a gift you don't deserve, mercy. I suggest you spend the rest of your life trying to become worthy of it. Marcus could only nod, still crying. Judge Mendoza banged her gavel. Based on everything I've heard and seen today, I'm ready to make my ruling. Everyone sat up straighter, paying attention. First, Judge Mendoza said, looking at Mr. Peterson, I want to address the false accusations made against Mrs. Thompson at the beginning of these proceedings. Mr. Peterson, you stood in my courtroom and accused Mrs. Thompson of being unfaithful with zero credible evidence. You called her a gold digger when, in fact, she's worth more than your client. You presented a case built on lies and assumptions. Mr. Peterson stood up. Your Honor, I was simply representing my clients. You were simply being a bully, Judge Mendoza interrupted sharply. And I don't appreciate lawyers who come into my courtroom and make false accusations to intimidate opposing parties, especially parties who are representing themselves. Consider this a formal reprimand, Mr. Peterson. If I ever see you pull something like this again, I'll report you to the State Bar Association. Do you understand? Mr. Peterson went pale. Yes, Your Honor. Sit down, Judge Mendoza said. Mr. Peterson sat down so fast he almost fell out of his chair. Judge Mendoza continued. Now, as for the divorce settlement, here is my ruling. The marriage between Marcus Thompson and Sarah Thompson is hereby dissolved. Mrs. Thompson will receive 50% of all marital assets, including Mr. Thompson's retirement contributions made during the marriage, 50% of the value of his vehicle, and 50% of any other property acquired during the marriage. She looked at Marcus. Mr. Thompson, you will pay all court costs and legal fees for both parties. Given Judge Harrison's rates, I estimate this will be approximately $75,000. Marcus made a choking sound. $75,000 was more than half of what he had in his savings. Furthermore, Judge Mendoza continued, I am entering a formal finding that Mr. Thompson committed adultery during the marriage. This finding will be included in the public divorce record. She picked up another paper. I'm also granting the restraining order. Mr. Thompson, you are not to contact, follow, harass, or come within 500 feet of Mrs. Thompson for a period of 5 years. If you violate this order, you will be arrested and charged with contempt of court. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Marcus said weakly. Good. Judge Mendoza looked at Sarah. Mrs. Thompson, do you have anything else you'd like to add? Sarah stood up. Actually, Your Honor, there is one more thing. Go ahead, Judge Mendoza said. Sarah looked at Marcus. I'm going to use some of my inheritance to expand the bakery. I'm going to hire more people and teach them how to bake. I'm going to create jobs for people who need them. Single mothers, people who are trying to get back on their feet, young people who need a chance. She smiled. A real, genuine smile that lit up her whole face. I'm going to build something good with my life. Something that helps people. Something that matters more than money or status or any of that superficial stuff. She looked directly at Marcus. And maybe someday, when you're working on becoming a better person, you'll remember that this is what I was trying to teach you all along. That the best things in life aren't things. They're people. They're kindness. They're love. They're making the world a little bit better than you found it. The courtroom erupted in applause. People were standing up, clapping, some of them crying. Even some of the court staff were wiping their eyes. Judge Mendoza had to bang her gavel several times. Order! Order in the court! The applause slowly died down, but people were still smiling. Judge Harrison walked over to his daughter and wrapped her in a huge hug. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered in her ear. "So incredibly proud." Margaret Chin, David Rodriguez, and Henry Blackwood all gathered around Sarah, congratulating her. Across the courtroom, Marcus sat alone at his table. Mr. Peterson had already packed up his briefcase and was heading for the door, probably eager to get away from this disaster of a case. Marcus just sat there, watching Sarah surrounded by people who loved and supported her, and realized what he'd lost. Not her money, not her connections, but her, the kind, genuine, amazing woman who had loved him when he was nobody special. The woman who had seen the best in him even when he couldn't see it himself. The woman who, even after everything he'd done, still had the grace to forgive him. The courtroom scene faded, and now we see Sarah 6 months later. She was standing in front of a newly renovated bakery. The sign above the door read, "Sarah's Second Chances Bakery and Training Center," in beautiful gold letters. The bakery was 3 times bigger than her old one. Through the big windows you could see people inside, young people, older people, people from all walks of life learning how to bake. They were wearing matching aprons and laughing as they worked. Sarah stood outside, looking at her dream come to life, and she smiled. Her father, Judge Harrison, stood next to her. He had retired from his legal practice and now spent his time helping Sarah run the business side of the bakery. "Your mother would be so proud," Judge Harrison said, putting his arm around his daughter. "I wish she could see this." "She can," Sarah said softly. "I believe she can." A car pulled up to the curb. A young woman got out. She looked nervous and uncertain. She walked up to Sarah hesitantly. "Are you Sarah?" the young woman asked. I saw your ad online. About the training program." "Yes," Sarah said warmly. "You must be Jennifer. Come on in. Let me show you around." As Sarah led the young woman inside, she turned back one more time to look at the sign above the door. Second chances. That's what this place was all about. Second chances for people who needed them. Second chances for people who had made mistakes. Second chances for people who just needed someone to believe in them. Sarah had gotten her second chance at happiness, and now she was giving that same gift to others. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus sat in a much smaller apartment than the fancy one he used to live in. After the divorce, he'd had to sell his expensive car to help pay the legal fees. He'd moved to a cheaper place. His company had found out about his affair and the misuse of company resources, and while they didn't fire him, they did demote him and put him on probation. His girlfriend, Ashley, the woman he'd cheated with, had left him the moment she found out he wasn't as wealthy as she thought. Turns out, she really was a gold digger, and when the gold disappeared, so did she. Marcus sat alone in his small apartment, eating takeout dinner by himself, scrolling through social media on his phone. He came across an article, "Local Woman Opens Bakery and Training Center to Help People in Need." There was a picture of Sarah, smiling brightly, surrounded by her students. Marcus stared at the picture for a long time. He thought about the man he used to be, the man who went to that bakery every morning just to see Sarah smile. The man who fell in love with a kind woman who made cinnamon rolls and didn't care about money. Then he thought about the man he'd become, the man who threw all of that away for status and wealth that turned out to be hollow and meaningless. Marcus closed his phone and set it down. He thought about Sarah's words in the courtroom. "Maybe someday, when you're working on becoming a better person, maybe," Marcus whispered to himself in his empty apartment. "Maybe someday." He stood up, walked to his desk, and pulled out a piece of paper. He started writing. Not to Sarah, he knew better than to violate the restraining order, but to himself. A list of things he needed to change, ways he needed to grow. Steps toward becoming the kind of man who might someday be worthy of the mercy Sarah had shown him. It was a start, a small start, but it was something. Back at the bakery, Sarah was teaching a class of 10 students how to make her famous chocolate chip cookies. "The secret," she said, smiling as she measured out ingredients, "is to use real vanilla extract, not the imitation stuff, and you have to cream the butter and sugar for at least 3 minutes. Don't rush it. Good things take time." One of her students, A young man named Carlos, who was trying to turn his life around after some bad choices, raised his hand. "Miss Sarah, why do you do this? I mean, you could be doing anything with your life. Why teach people like us how to bake?" Sarah stopped what she was doing and looked at Carlos. Then she looked at all her students, people who had been given a second chance by society, people who just needed someone to believe in them. "Because," Sarah said gently, "someone once told me that the best things in life aren't things. They're people. They're kindness. They're making the world a little bit better than you found it. And I believe that." She smiled. "Every person deserves a chance to find their passion, to learn a skill, to build a life they're proud of. If I can help with that, even just a little bit, then my life has meaning." The students looked at her with such gratitude in their eyes that Sarah felt her heart swell. "Now," she said, clapping her hands together, "let's get these cookies in the oven. We have orders to fill." The bakery filled with laughter and the warm smell of baking cookies. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in beautiful shades of orange and pink. And Sarah, standing in her bakery surrounded by people she was helping, smiled the kind of smile that comes from deep, genuine happiness. She had been through hell. She had been betrayed, mocked, and dragged through court. She had cried more tears than she thought possible. But she had survived. More than that, she had thrived. She had learned that sometimes the worst things that happen to us can lead to the best things in our lives. That sometimes losing everything helps us figure out what really matters. That sometimes the end of one chapter is just the beginning of something even better. Sarah looked up at the ceiling and whispered, "Thank you. Thank you for her father who showed up when she needed him most. Thank you for the strength to forgive. Thank you for the wisdom to choose kindness over revenge. Thank you for this second chance at happiness. And thank you for teaching her that she was never a nobody. She was somebody who mattered, somebody with value, somebody worthy of love and respect." The door to the bakery opened, and the evening customers started coming in, drawn by the smell of fresh-baked cookies and the promise of something sweet. Sarah greeted each one with a smile, because that's what she did best. She made people happy. And in doing so, she found her own happiness too. This story teaches us several important lessons. Never judge people by their jobs or their money. Sarah worked in a bakery, and Marcus thought that made her less than him. But it turned out she was worth more than him in every way. Financially, morally, and personally. Kindness is strength, not weakness. Sarah showed mercy to Marcus even though he didn't deserve it. That took more courage than revenge would have. What you put out into the world comes back to you. Marcus treated Sarah with cruelty and got justice served to him. Sarah treated others with kindness and built a beautiful life. Real love doesn't care about money or status. The best relationships are built on genuine connection, not superficial things. It's never too late for a second chance. Sarah got a second chance at happiness. Her students got second chances at life. Even Marcus has the opportunity for a second chance if he chooses to take it. Stand up for yourself, but don't let anger consume you. Sarah fought for justice in court, but she didn't let revenge turn her into a bitter person. Remember, you are never nobody. Every person has value. Every person deserves respect. And every person deserves a chance to be loved for who they truly are. Thank you so much for watching this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to this channel to support our growth. Hit that like button and drop a comment below telling us what you learned from Sarah's story. What would you have done in her situation? Would you have forgiven Marcus? Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message today. Remember, be kind, choose love over hate, and never let anyone make you feel like you're nobody, because you're somebody special. See you in the next story. Stay blessed.